before we start, there's one person I think I want to introduce you to. This guy's Wilson, and he's going to be on test for me today. So he's about to have the crap beat out. Aren't you, buddy?
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Learner's Digest. Today's topic is all about how you as practitioners can apply and manipulate fundamental motor control and learning principles to a training program. Today's focus is on the sport of volleyball. I am Mitch Tinsley, and alongside me today is my co-worker Alex Nickerson. So let's get started. With the sport of volleyball, there are three main skills that form the basis of the game: the dig, the set, and the spike. Not being able to execute any of these skills will make it very difficult for a learner to perform at any level. For this training intervention, the target population is adolescents aged 10 to 20 years. With this in mind, we're looking at someone maybe in grade 5 and up. Maybe this means they may have had little experience with the game, however they may still be in the early stages of learning, with the development of fundamental skills still in progress. Moving to the skill classification for the volleyball skills. So we'll start with the one-dimensional skill classification system. So these skills, they're all gross motor skills. They are discrete motor skills with a specific start and end point, and they're also more closed motor skills. However, it's important to note there's no set point on the continuum. It's just they're more one sort of skill compared to another. On top of our one-dimensional classification, we also have two-dimensional classification systems. So for volleyball, in terms of environmental context, we are in motion and there's presence of ITV, which is inter-trial variability. And in terms of the action requirements, we have changes in body location around the court, as well as object manipulation. Gentile taxonomy paints a clear picture, as you can see top right on screen. It shows how all these different requirements and factors interact with each other. Now that we've taken a look at the skill classification for volleyball, we'll now move on to the participant and learner in our training program. So in this video, Alex will act as the participant. Alex is 19 years old, and he has had some experience in volleyball through his high school years. However, since leaving school, he hasn't played much volleyball. So if we expect some positive transfer of learning to be present from his past experiences, not just from his high school HPE lessons, but also his general sporting ability and other sports that he's played, such as soccer. He will demonstrate different aspects of the training program, and we'll also discuss a couple of key points that you can manipulate in your training program to create an effective training program and environment.
Our program approaches learning from a motor program or top-down approach. This approach is often linked to the way computers work. Hang on, so computers. Yeah, that's better. Now, the motor program theory of learning describes executing a skill as a linear pattern. You perceive the situation in front of you, your brain recalls previous motor patterns in order to make a decision on how to act, then you're programmed to execute that skill. Now, the dig, set, spike motor program is a complex skill, but fortunately for us, the brain's pretty lazy, as was found out in 1975. Schmidt's idea of a generalized motor program states that the brain can draw on similar experiences to find common motor abilities, known as invariant features, to aid development of a new motor program. We're approaching it from this angle because the complex nature of the dig, set, spike skill, along with the learner's previous experience, albeit limited, means that if we can get a head start on the execution of the skill, we'll take it. So how are we going to decide if this has actually worked? Well, the problem is that we can't actually see learning. There isn't any kind of sign that we can look at and go, learning was here. So we have to infer learning. There's a few things we can use for this, based on the acronym SISIAP, or as BSCI. Capacity? Who comes up with these? A stands for adaptability, which is whether the learner can perform the skill in a number of varying game scenarios. P stands for persistency, which is whether the learner can perform the skill after being away from practice for a while. S stands for stability, which is whether external factors inhibit the performance of the skill. I stands for improvement, is the learner generally getting better at the skill in the instructor's opinion. And C stands for consistency, how often can the learner sustain successful performances of the skill. Further, we need to settle on a model of learning. Fitz and Posner's model, broken into the stages of cognitive, associative, and autonomous, has a good progression that our learner can follow. Initially, the learner finds the basic movement patterns and learns what they have to do, the cognitive stage. Next, now the learner knows what they have to do, they have to refine their technique and understand the most effective way of performing this skill, the associative stage. Once this is mastered and they can complete the skill with little intentional demand, they have reached the autonomous stage of learning. This structure is what we'll be assessing our learner against to help determine whether learning has occurred. And now, the moment you didn't know you were waiting for. Our program has 4 sessions per week, each lasting 45 minutes. The learner begins with the individual components of the skill, with drill progressions for each, before chaining the skills together in the final weeks.
First motor control and learning principle that we'll be implementing in our volleyball program is the concept of feedback. So feedback is a tool that we can use as performance practitioners to improve the performance and successfulness of your athletes and your learners. So how we will use this in our program is the use of verbal feedback with the learner. We'll use terminal and concurrent feedback, so terminal being at the end, just at the end of the skill, and concurrent being during the skill. And also we'll use knowledge of result, which is based on the outcome of the skill, and then knowledge of performance, which is how the learner, it's about the movement characteristics. So why is feedback important? So John Hattie, 2020, stated that feedback is one of the most powerful influences on learning and achievement, but this impact can be either positive or negative. So it's important that as practitioners we provide effective feedback that is as positive as possible. Our learning principle that we'll be targeting in our training session is around practice scheduling and the idea of contextual interference. So what is it? When a learner or an athlete is performing different tasks within the one context, there is a level of CI. And this depends on the organisation of practice. So block practice is concerned with low CI. Serial practice is moderate CI, and then when you go to random practice, you have a high level of contextual interference, or CI. So how you can implement this? So like week 1, you might start blocked practice, keep everything nice and simple with low contextual interference, and as you progress through the program, you move to moderate CI with serial practice and high CI with random practice. And why this is important? So research has shown that groups or individuals who have completed random practice perform better at these transfer retention tests. Not just beginners, but also elite level athletes.
One of the most important aspects that we had to consider was how we move the learner through the program to perform the entire skill. The Naylor and Briggs hypothesis shows us that tasks with high complexity and high organisation should begin practice with part practice, but transition to whole practice as soon as possible, making this the guide for the progression of our program. Following categorisation from Whiteman and Linton from 1985, we then also chose to use progressive part practice to provide the learner with a full understanding of the timing and integration between each segment. We've reflected this through the progression of our drills. The skill is taught in broken segments, dig, set, and spike, so that the learner can master these individual components, or at least try to, before moving on to drills that link the skills to each other. First dig to set, set to spike, and finally all 3 together. Our final concept was manipulation of the context in which a skill is performed. Context in which a skill is practiced is important to maximise transfer for game scenarios. Normally in a game of volleyball, the same person would not perform their dig, set, and spike back to back. However, we set up the program so that the goal was for the learner to perform each of these in succession. This increases contextual interference compared to a game scenario. As stated previously, an increase in contextual interference has been shown to facilitate learning. As such, by making the skill harder to perform in our sessions, the execution of the skill will be seen much easier in a game scenario. Yes, we really are the kind of people to make practice harder than it needs to be. So that's all from us on behalf of both myself and Mitchell. Thanks for tuning in this week. Come back next week where I'll be showing you how to actually hit the crossbar.